Hello, you awesome art parents. Welcome to November. It's crazy. The year goes by so fast, right? I can't believe we're already in the holidays. A couple of things really quick. I don't remember, but I don't think I mentioned the bullet point sheets that I put on the art card. So in that purple binder that says art literacy, there'll be a copy of the lesson, the full lesson, and then also this little sheet, half sheet that I laminate that has the project and the artist's information just condensed down so you can look at it quickly and refer back and get dates or whatever if you want the dates. But really, the point of these lessons, or the way I envision these lessons going, is you read it through one or two times, look over it really quick before you teach, and then you kind of give the salient points, the things that really struck you to your kids. So, for first graders, I'm going to say Mark Rothko was this amazing guy. He did great in school. He went to Yale, but he just didn't like to conform to the normal things. And he started to do art, and as he was doing art, he started out with stuff that looked like everybody else's, that looked like stuff. But then as time went on, he kind of wanted to just show emotion, and he just wanted the viewers to see emotion. And so his art became more and more abstract, which means it didn't show a real thing. And then walk them through, show them the pictures as you go. Whereas like the upper grades, they're interested in the details, and sometimes I even slip and maybe give them details that might be a little bit more gritty than they really need. And Mark Rothko is one of those artists because unfortunately he was a super tortured guy. It's really sad. He really took his art so seriously. And as he got older, as he got into his 60s, he began to have arthritis and back problems, physical conditions that prevented him from working on these great big canvases. I picked this picture to show of him because it shows how big these canvases were that he liked to work on. He loved the art to be really, really big in scale because he really wanted the viewer to get lost in the piece. He wanted the viewer to feel themselves like transported into the piece. And when he couldn't do that anymore, he tried to work on smaller scale, but it was horrible to him. And he had 2 assistants in his career, but he hated working with the assistants and he didn't trust them. He really took his art seriously. Poor guy. I mean, I kind of feel like, man, you should have just lightened up a little bit, buddy. It's not that serious. But to him, it really was. It really was a spiritual thing to paint these paintings. And he wanted the viewers to have a spiritual experience, which is why his work culminated in the Rothko Chapel, which is still there in Houston, Texas today. So you could go see that. I haven't been there to see that, but I would love to go see it. I hear it really is kind of an amazing experience. And actually, since I kind of jumped myself and I'm out of order, but I'll just show you. I printed out a picture. So it's this octagonal building with benches. And they actually, I think there are a couple of rooms off of this main room. But this main room has 14 total canvases that are all painted in different hues of black. So remember we talked about Mark Rothko's method of painting just a little bit, and it's really unusual. Usually artists gesso a canvas or they treat a canvas so that the paint will sit on top of the canvas, but he liked to paint right on the untreated canvas so the paint would really sink down in, and this would give his paintings all of these layers. So he painted in really thinned down layers, just tons and tons of paint. I mean, I have honestly never painted on an untreated canvas, so I don't even know for sure. But I painted on fabric before and it soaks up paint, right? It really soaks in that paint. And to him, it was all about like really taking time to sit there and look at this black canvas that, you first walk in and you go, well, this one's got a slightly blue hue. These 2 right here are a little bit more pinkish. You kind of see things, but then as you sit and really look and meditate, you see these other colors coming through, and it becomes like a transcendent, like a meditative spiritual experience for the viewer. And it was that way for him as he painted. So kind of interesting, I think super interesting. I've seen one Rothko in real life, and it was beautiful. I mean, I really did spend a lot of time looking at the nuances in the brushwork and in the colors, and there really is a lot there to see. And a lot of times people say that abstract art is art for artists, because a lot of times when you don't realize the work that goes into it, you look at something, you go, that's a black canvas. But then you take a minute longer and you can see, well, it's a black canvas, but it's got this, subtle shading down at the bottom. And, there's a highlight here, and you can see how there are other colors woven in. You take a minute. But I think anybody can see that if they take the time. You take the time and start to look, and you'll see that there are amazing things. And it's kind of the same in real life, right? I'm always telling my art students, really look at the things around you. Really look, because grass isn't just green. The sky isn't just blue. There are subtle color shifts and variations, and it's observing those things that make your art better and more interesting, and make you appreciate the world around you more, which I think is something that everybody can use, right? Whether you want to be an artist or not. So you can see his earlier work. He did a ton of subway scenes. They're my favorites. They're awesome. Just really, even his early work that's representational, meaning that it has a subject that you can identify. You can see that these are people sitting on a platform of a subway station. But it has a definite graphic quality to it. You can see, really strong horizontal, vertical lines, really strong panes of color in there. You can see where he's going to kind of go looking back. It's kind of interesting. So these are earlier pieces. Interesting, beautiful. And then as he goes on, he starts to become more and more abstract. And so you've got these pieces that are kind of, now you're looking at this and you're like, yeah, I don't really know for sure. And actually, I don't have the title for this out right now. So a lot of times with these abstract pieces, once you see the title, you go, oh, I can see it. I can see that there's a candlestick in there. Or I can see why this might be a bowl of fruit, And then as time goes on, he starts with these multiforms or color-filled paintings where he's really broken everything down now, and it's just the shapes in the canvas. And he was hugely successful during his life. Actually, some of his contemporaries, some of his friends called him a sellout because his art was identified, I think, by Forbes magazine as a good investment piece. And so people bought his work. He made good money while he was alive. He continued to teach for most of his life, I think because he really genuinely enjoyed it. But also that rejection by his peers and friends was another significant contributor to his depression. It was really hard on him. It's just, it's unfortunate. A lot of artists really do deal with mental health and emotional issues. But you can see, and what I like to do when I'm looking at abstract art with students is just take a minute and say, what do you think? What does this make you feel? What do you think of? What are the feelings you feel when you see this? Take a look at, let's see, this piece and this piece together, and what do you think? Does one make you feel happy, sad, peaceful, calm, energetic? Kind of talk to the students about that. I will put a color wheel on the art cart so you can kind of talk about that also. Traditionally, and it's not for everybody, some artists have really specific views on what colors meant. Van Gogh always pops into my head first. He was really specific. His colors meant something specific to him. He was very vocal about it. If you didn't see red and green, if you saw that as Happy Christmas, he would say, no, it's evil. That's evil. So, kind of interesting, right? Rothko didn't necessarily speculate as much, but he did make quotes about different pieces that let you know that he did have certain ideas in mind. But, take a look and talk to the students about it. Usually cool colors like blues and greens and purples are more peaceful, more tranquil, maybe a little bit more sad, whereas warm colors, yellows, oranges, reds, tend to be more energetic, more vibrant, more happy, more angry. You just different feelings. And there's no right answer. And I think it's really important to always mention that to the students. There's no right answer. When you're looking at art, even with artists like Van Gogh, where they've said, like, this is what I meant. I painted this room in green and red to show you that I felt the demons of alcoholism in this room. Even then, as the viewer, it's your right to have your own interpretation of art. And I think that's one of the best things about art. I think it's amazing. And so I encourage you to just set these up on the board as you're talking to the students. Kind of point out, like, look at the variations in color here. You see the red kind of showing through the green. And what does that make? Well, red and green together are going to make brown because they're opposite on the color wheel. So you kind of see these earthy hues peeking out. And you can see like more of a dry brush technique in here with some very saturated, more wet application of paint too. So we're going to watercolor. Mark Rothko did do watercolors, especially later in life when he was trying to work on a small scale. But mostly it's just, this is what works best for us in our school of 500 awesome kids. I like to tell the students watercolor paper, it's a little bit expensive. So we kind of are a little bit more careful with it. If you have a student who feels like they've ruined it and they're coming to pieces, we all know there's always like one in every class, right? Don't tell them they can't have another. Give them another one, but just say, hey, we try to be kind of careful with this paper, so do your best work. Because this paper costs a lot more, so we can't buy as much as we could of the cardstock is like 4 cents a sheet. This is like 70 cents a sheet, which is still a great price for watercolor paper. But times 500, it adds up. So I'm going to try and show you my watercolor techniques. But this is one of those times when using your camera on your computer is a lot less beneficial because watercolor runs. And so I'm just going to show you really quick. I'm getting my brush really wet. And I'm just going to take a minute and like really put some water in. I'm even going to like dip again and just really get my paint nice and wet. And I'm going to do a wash section on this. I've taped off so I have 2 big sections. You tape it off however you want. If you want to have one big section and work it all in together, great. If you want to have like a bunch of little strips down your paper, great. Whatever you want to do. And look, you can see already. So this is called wet on dry, right? But I'm kind of putting down a wash to add things in. And I've got this kind of dry brush thing going on in here, but I want to wash. So I'm going to just pick up some water and add it in and move this paint around. And the fun thing with watercolor is that you can kind of move it around. So I want it to be a little bit different in the different areas. I'm going to leave it light up at the top. And I'm going to let it be a little bit darker at the bottom. So light wash up here, darker at the bottom. And now at the bottom here, I'm going to put some wet on wet. And I'm just going to get some of this purple and I'm going to bring it in with the blue. And see how they kind of mix together and make something interesting. And if I want them to mix even more, I just got my paintbrush wet. And I'm just going to let it kind of do its thing. Keep it nice and wet. And this is hard because really it's dripping so much. But then also, while I'm here, I'm going to come back in and dry brush over this, but I'm also going to add a little bit of salt. And you see how the salt kind of soaks up the paint in the water. And it'll just give it a cool kind of sandy texture when it dries. Now, here's the trick. It's nice when you just tape this down to the desk, especially if you're doing this in the afternoon, you can say, can we just tape this down to their desk? They can go out to lunch, then we pull it up. But you've got to let this completely dry because if I brush this salt off before it's completely dry, it's not going to completely absorb and I'm not going to get that cool pebbled effect. So I want to do that. And then, maybe down here, I'm going to come in with some more purple. And I put that on just a little, like really light, but I'm gonna dry brush some red onto that. So to do that, did you see how my purple is really light here because I just barely put my paintbrush swirled around in that. But if I want to have a really bright color, I'm gonna get my water in there and I am just gonna like scrub, scrub, scrub. Make my brush go around and around and around because that is loading up more paint onto my brush. And now I wanna make sure my brush is pretty dry. I only put one little scoop of water into there, so this brush is pretty dry. But if I'm even worried about it, there are napkins on the art cart, and I can just take this and just like tap it against the napkin a few times and see how that gets some of the water off. And then look, I can come back in and I'm just gonna dry brush. Ooh, I am dripping, dripping. I'm gonna dry brush some red onto this purple and see how when the brush is kind of dry, it makes this interesting pattern. Maybe I want to even a little bit more. It kind of almost looks scrapey on there, huh? So as I work, you'll kind of notice that I'm working and I'm putting down a little bit and then I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about it. Because even abstract art, you have to think about composition just a little bit. And composition just means where I'm putting what I'm putting on the canvas. So composition, if I'm painting a bowl of fruit, is where I'm placing the fruit on the canvas. Whereas composition in abstract art is where I have chosen to put a lot of paint, a lot of color here. And I think I'll probably come back in with some purple. I'll let this dry and come back in with some purple and dry brush a little bit more. I'm going to add some more colors up in here. But by thinking about where I put those on the paper, I can create something that's a lot more pleasing. And I always like to tell my students that there's an artist, Jackson Pollock, who I would love to do, but I just think it's too messy to do in the classroom for art literacy. But he was that painter that painted splats, like he had the paint splatters all over these great big canvases. And if you mention it, usually kids have seen something, you know, something similar, something based off of his work. And they did a study with Jackson Pollock in the 60s where they took some of his canvases and put them up in a museum. And then they had a monkey paint canvases with the same colors that he used. So they looked pretty similar, but the monkey just did, you know, the monkey's work with the canvases. And then they put those up in the museum along with the Jackson Pollocks. And they had all of these people come in and take a look and say, which ones did you like? Which did you think were by the artist? Which did you think were by the monkey? And it is crazy, but overwhelmingly people liked the Jackson Pollocks. It's so crazy. But even when you're not doing something that is representational, meaning that it shows something, there still are aesthetics you've got to think about, right? And so with the older kids, I would definitely talk about that a little bit. With the younger kids, let them do their things. I know in kindergarten and first grade, you're usually getting a half an hour for these lessons anyway, so you're kind of just letting them do their thing. But just tell them, leave this like this, go out to recess, lunch, whatever, put them back on the back table if you need to let it dry. And then you can see, once it starts to dry, you get these cool designs from the salt. We don't want to take the tape off or brush the salt off until it's completely dry because it might kind of mess things up. So we're just going to give it some time. And that's something their teacher will do with them. The teachers are super awesome. I've never had a teacher that's put out by having to just follow up like this. A lot of times they'll just say, leave it, you know, because I didn't tape all the way in. I've got tape on my edges. And that's actually how you want a watercolor because it holds the paper flat. And so they'll usually just say, just leave it there and we'll come back to it and take care of it a little bit later. Teachers are super awesome. So if you have any questions or need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you guys are having a great experience. I know we're still right at the beginning, but the year gets rolling really fast. It's always kind of crazy. But it's a fun way to volunteer in the classrooms. It's a fun thing to do. The kids are always super excited to see you. And I hope you're having a great time. Thanks so much.